incredible job of holding out under the most extraordinary circumstances and difficult circumstances. They've been incredibly courageous. The Russian attack was stalled there. It distracted the Russian advance. It held the Russians back. It kept Russian forces focused on Mariupol rather than exploiting to the north or to the west. So the defense was militarily successful. It was a humanitarian tragedy in the area. And I think that President Zelensky has made the right decision, ending the mission at this point and saving the lives of these brave defenders.
Do you think that Putin is going to announce victory there?
Well, I think that there wasn't a possibility of more success had they held on. So I think you have to consider that the defense in Mariupol was a relative success. You know, at the start of the war, it seemed that Russia had the possibility of sweeping throughout Ukraine. Well, Mariupol was a hard point, and they weren't able to continue the momentum of their advance, in part, large part in the south, because of Mariupol. And the continued dogged resistance of those defenders makes it a successful defense that may have proved a crucial turning point in the strategy of the whole war.
Yeah, they were hoping, General, for a blitzkrieg type of, sweep through Ukraine. That's what they miscalculated. And you rightly mentioned, the beginning of the war, we saw Russians sort of sprinkled around Ukraine. They had to regroup. Let's take a look at the map here. And it's pretty indicative of how the Russians had to sort of rethink their objectives. When we're so far into the war right now, General, do you get a sense that Russia is not achieving its military objectives, that it needs to rethink its strategy? And we thought that the East was going to be the big focal point, but they're also losing ground there.
Well, it's clear that Russia hasn't achieved its strategy. But I think we have to be clear that in the West, we have to think our strategy through. You know, I hear many voices in the West saying, oh, just stop the killing, just get it stopped right now. Yes, that's a humanitarian outcry that's very understandable. But this is a struggle not just about Ukraine, but about the future of the international system. It's very important that when the fighting ends, Russia be out of Ukraine and Ukraine's territorial integrity and political independence be assured, just as the Budapest Memorandum of 1994 promised. Aggression can't be rewarded. So yes, the Russians are trying to rethink their strategy. We have to be sure about our strategy and what our objectives are in assisting Ukraine.
Look, the Russians have a choice to further mobilize or de-escalate. We know that de-escalation would be admitting defeat. How do you think Putin is going to be looking at the latest strategies, and also keeping in mind Finland and Sweden have formally applied to join NATO?
Well, I think Putin is still rational, despite the fact that he must be irate, feeling besieged and angry that it hasn't worked out the way he planned. But a decision to escalate by Russia has to be measured against what the results would be. And the simple truth is that Russian escalation would bring a more rapid defeat for Russia. And as long as we continue to show this to Putin, he's not likely to escalate. In fact, this is what we need to do to end this fighting. We have to convince Mr. Putin that he cannot win and that escalation will cause him to lose more rapidly.
All right, General Clark, thank you so very much. Always good speaking with you. Much appreciated for your insight.
Thank you.
And as fighting in the south of Ukraine continues, we have been getting more reports of Russian attacks near the strategic city of Odessa. A tourist center was hit by missiles on Monday. Though the port city has not come under full assault, Odessa is home to many Russian-speaking people who could potentially be allies with Moscow. But some are angry about the brutality Russia has shown in this fight. CNN's Sarah Seidner has that story.
The remains of freshly bombed buildings, a hotel and homes reduced to dust, the result of the latest Russian missile attack in the Odessa region. that has experienced strike after strike on places people live, work, and visit. This is Russia's attempt to terrorize a target it desperately wants to possess.
Tell me what the strategic importance is of Odessa.
Одесса действительно стратегический город.
This is the seagate of our country, he says. This is a city of legend. It's home to Ukraine's largest Black Sea port, used both commercially and militarily. Russia has already attacked its oil refinery. If Putin's forces were to take the Odessa region, Ukraine's entire Black Sea coast would be controlled by Russia. The mayor of Odessa bristles at the idea. Ukraine today is a maritime power. It will be a completely different state without access to the sea, without transport logistics, he says. We and our armed forces will do everything to prevent the enemy from entering. But the ties to the enemy run deep, historically and financially. Before the war, Russian tourists helped this Ukrainian seaside city thrive. Ideal. Russians really liked our cuisine, our shops here, the sea, architecture, and there were no problems. Alexander Babich is a historian who also owns a tour guide company. He says citizens of Odessa speak Russian more than they speak Ukrainian. Pro-Russian politicians were voted into office regularly. The mayor was once friendly with Russia. He himself spoke to us in Russian.
Were you pro-Russian before and changed?
I want to say that I have always had pro-Odessa views, he says, but I love and respect the history of my city where I was born. Everywhere you look in this city is a reminder of its Russian history. There are statues of Alexander Pushkin, considered Russia's greatest poet, and monuments to the conqueror of this land, Russian Empress Catherine the Great. Her sculpture used to be guarded and kept pristine. Now, it's soiled and a fresh Ukrainian flag flies on it. There has been a long fight over whether to remove these symbols of imperialism in Odessa. There is social demand, saying we need to get rid of these symbols, he says. Not everyone agrees. Odessa writer and poet Paul Makarov says the monuments should stand.
The
attitude was positive. We appreciate and respect Catherine. Today's events should in no way affect our attitude towards her. And there is this problem. If we remove the monument to Catherine, we need to rename the square, he says. It was for a time named after Karl Marx, for a while named after Hitler, then again Karl Marx, and here again after Catherine. What name should we choose? But the more Russian missiles wipe away lives here, the more fierce the argument to erase the physical reminders of its Russian past. Sarah Seidner, CNN, Odessa.
All right, well, coming up, we return to our top story. Finland and Sweden push ahead with their efforts to join NATO, but not all of the bloc's members seem pleased that they're joining. And we'll take you back to Beirut to see why Hezbollah suffered a setback in Lebanon's first vote since the 2019 uprising. Well, welcome back. In Lebanon's first election since the country's economic meltdown, some voters went looking for change, and that means the pro-Hezbollah bloc, backed by Iran, has lost its majority in Lebanon's parliament. It may sound like a big shift, but the question is, how significant is it really? CNN's Ben Wiedemann has been covering Lebanon for decades, and he joins us now live from the capital, Beirut. Ben, always good to see you. We have a bit of time to get through some of the key issues, and I think that when we say Hezbollah coalition has lost some of its seats or the majority in parliament, one wonders, who are these other candidates, these independent candidates that are now gaining traction? What do we know about their ideologies?
Well, there's at this point around 12 or almost 10% of the parliament or the new parliament are people called reformists or independents. These are people, some of whom were actually participants in the October 2019 uprising that filled this spot right here, which is just next to the government headquarters, the Prime Minister's office, back in October 2019. Some are affiliated with the reform movement. So certainly this is significant, keeping in mind that in the last parliamentary elections in 2018, there was only one person who was identified as independent who got a seat in parliament. So it does appear that this is significant. However, of course, they're only 10% perhaps of parliament. So it's going to be a bit of a stretch for them to actually be able to push through legislation, but it's certainly okay. What you're hearing is gunfire from an adjacent neighborhood where there are many supporters of Nabih Berri, who's the Speaker of Parliament. He's apparently speaking at the moment on television. He is a close ally of Hezbollah, so you might be hearing a bit of that gunfire as I speak. So anyway, to get back to what I was saying, yes, it's significant, and it definitely sends a message to the members of the other members of parliament that they need to start listening to the ordinary concerns of people who don't identify themselves by their sect, but rather as Lebanese who want to see this country fixed, the economy brought back to life. Eleni?
So Ben, you and I, we've spoken about this numerous times. We've seen stalemates in the past where there's a failure to form a government, and that has played a very strong role in the economic demise of Lebanon, which is absolutely tragic to watch when you see what inflation is doing to people there. Are you concerned that we might be seeing a stalemate scenario playing out once again?
No, when you consider that the last parliamentary elections took place in May of 2018. In the subsequent 4 years, about half of those, just slightly less, were spent waiting for politicians to agree on the next government. So that's the real danger. And what we've seen already is the limping, the Lebanese lira that has lost so much of its value against the dollar has lost more value in the last 24 hours because people realize it will take a long time for these politicians to form a new government. And the longer that there's no government, the longer it will be that Lebanon's pressing economic problems will not be addressed. Certainly what we're seeing is with perhaps the weakening of Hezbollah, with more reformers in government, there is a chance that there will be progress made, that the politicians will finally focus on this country's problems. But it may take a while, and this really just underscores yet again where the anger of so many Lebanese at the political elite comes from. The political elite is fine. They're not suffering. Most of them have their money abroad, and they continue to live the high life, while most people here are seeing their standard of living plummet. Eleni?
Yeah, and Ben, we've even seen from international institutions saying, well, there has to be reform, there has to be a change in the elite's thinking and the way that Lebanon is governed. Do you get a sense from having covered Lebanon in such a long, over such a long period of time, that this could be the start of change?
I think, going into the elections, there was a lot of skepticism that nothing would change, that the politics would continue to have no relation to reality here. But after it, I think people are taking hope that perhaps the message is getting across that, you shouldn't protect your sect, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Druze, or whatever, that you should be looking out for the welfare of ordinary people. You as a member of parliament, you as a politician, as a president, as a prime minister, as a minister in government. Certainly the message that's coming out is that despite the divisions within the so-called reformist camp, the fact that there were multiple lists in almost every electoral district, that if the reform candidates had joined in one list, that they would have done much better. But the fact that, despite that they did so well indicates there's a huge appetite for change. It's just that there's still a long way to go before change, real change, can actually happen. Eleni?
Yeah, you'd think that the welfare of the average people would be priority for those governing. But Ben, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be speaking on this a lot more. Much appreciated. Right, we're seeing new tensions elsewhere in the region after mourners at a funeral procession in Jerusalem clashed with Israeli police. The Palestinian Red Crescent says more than 70 Palestinians were injured. Israeli police say 6 officers were also hurt. The funeral was for a man who died following last month's unrest at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound. We have Atika Schubert covering this recent wave of violence, and she joins us now from Jerusalem. Atika, from what we understand, and also the CNN producers on the ground, do we know why Israeli forces were using force or violence against the Palestinian mourners, and what exactly prompted this escalation?
Well, I think you have to understand first that Israeli security forces and police in particular have been on very increased alert recently. Tensions have really increased across Israel and the West Bank because of a spate of attacks on Israeli citizens by Palestinians. A number of Israelis have been killed, and as a result, you've seen Israeli security forces in general have this heightened state of alert. However, it is the second time in a week that we've seen Israeli police use force at Palestinian funerals in Jerusalem. Yesterday's funeral was for Walid al-Sharif. He's a young Palestinian man who was actually injured last month during unrest, also involving Israeli police at Al-Aqsa's Mosque compound in the old city of Jerusalem. This happened last month, but he succumbed to his injuries just this week, and so the funeral was yesterday. Israeli police blocked people from attending his funeral at the mosque, and as a result, that's what triggered the clashes that lasted for at least an hour. Palestinians threw bottles, rocks, and fireworks. Israeli police used tear gas, stun grenades, and rubber bullets. At least one person was very seriously injured when he was shot in the eye with a rubber-coated bullet. Unfortunately, this is just the latest in this cycle of violence that is continuing. As I mentioned, there was those spate of violent and deadly attacks, and as a result, Israeli security forces have blocked off access to the Palestinian territories and conducted a number of raids in the West Bank, some of which have turned deadly. And in fact, the Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh was covering one of those Israeli police raids in the town of Jenin when she was shot and killed. So it does not, these tensions continue to rise, and there doesn't seem to be any way at this point to calm them down.
Atika Schubert, thank you so very much. Let's get you up to speed now on some other stories that are on our radar. The skies over Iraq glowing red after another sandstorm hit the country. Health officials tell CNN at least 4,000 people have suffered breathing issues. Flights out of Baghdad International Airport have resumed after being halted on Monday. This is the latest in a series of storms to strike Iraq in recent weeks. Cuba says it welcomes the easing of some U.S. restrictions. The Biden White House is reversing some Trump-era policies, making it easier for families to visit relatives on the communist-run island. But Cuba will remain on the U.S. State Department list of countries that support terrorism. North Korea has released the first specific figures on its COVID outbreak since acknowledging the country's first case last week. Health officials told state TV there have been around 168 confirmed COVID-19 infections. State media, however, have reported 1.4 million cases of, quote, fevers and 56 deaths. Ahead, we take you inside Afghanistan, where there is no food, no jobs, and fewer human rights. Christiane Amanpour will join us live from Kabul with a look at how the country is doing 9 months after the Taliban takeover. Plus, our top story tonight, Finland and Sweden are about to formally apply to NATO, but not all NATO members are sure they want them to join. We will take you to Sweden and Turkey just ahead. Finland and Sweden will hand in their formal applications to join NATO on Wednesday. Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson made the announcement just a short time ago. Speaking alongside her, Finland's president praised the move as a triumph for democracy. But their membership to NATO isn't a done deal. Turkey's president is voicing his opposition. He's accusing both nations of harboring terrorists and told them not to bother sending delegations to Turkey to try and change his mind.
Pazartesi günü Swedish and Finnish delegations are coming to Turkey on Monday. Are they coming to convince us? Excuse me, but they should not tire themselves. First of all, we should not say yes to those who impose sanctions on Turkey to join NATO, because then NATO would cease to be a security organization and become a place where representatives of terrorist organizations are concentrated.
With Turkey as NATO's second largest military power, it could be a significant roadblock. And we have reporters following both sides of the story. CNN's Nina Dos Santos joins us now from Stockholm, Sweden, and Jemana Karache is in Istanbul. Nina, I'd like to start off with you. I mean, you're seeing a show of force, Sweden and Finland making this decision together, announcing together. Give me a sense of what more needs to be done? Because you and I have spoken about this. This is a process and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and there's a recognition here in Sweden and also in Helsinki that it could take up to a year. And during that time, these countries need to show that they can continue to jointly negotiate their accession and that they won't be torn apart by any of these kind of wedge issues that are being thrown in their way, not least by, of course, Turkey, that has raised objections, as you just heard there, to Sweden offering asylum to Kurds, people who President Erdogan says are affiliated with the PKK and YPG. These are groups that he deems as terrorist organizations. And that criticism is largely leveled, for the large part, at Sweden rather than Finland. What we saw in this press conference was a joint show of force, as you said, à deux, which hopefully will then eventually lead to protection with 32 members if these two are eventually admitted into this elite and most powerful military alliance. And what we're seeing to try and push the diplomatic levers, especially with regard to Turkish opposition here, is the United States getting involved, with the US President Joe Biden having invited both of these two leaders now to Washington, D.C. to discuss their NATO membership bids. That meeting will take place on Thursday. We heard from the Swedish Prime Minister and also the Finnish President, whose parliament overwhelmingly voted in support of NATO just a few hours ago, that both of them would submit those bids tomorrow morning to NATO HQ by way of their ambassadors. But we also heard that they were looking forward to more of a relationship with Turkey. So that's quite interesting there. It gave an idea that there might be a bit of a diplomatic window, that Sweden might be willing to negotiate on some things. We're just not quite clear at this stage what. Eleni?
Nina Dos Santos, thank you so very much. We have Jemana Karasha standing by for us as well. Jemana, as we've just heard from Nina, the Turkish opposition right now is an interesting one. I want you to give me a sense of what Erdogan is demanding and whether he's been very clear about whether Turkey is going to block a vote on Sweden and Finland joining.
Look, I mean, Eleni, over the past few days, we've heard from Turkish officials and perhaps less diplomatically from President Erdogan what their issues are. And this centers around what Nina was mentioning there, the perceived support for Kurdish separatist groups, namely the PKK, which is deemed a terrorist organization not just by Turkey, but by the EU and the United States. President Erdogan and Turkish officials saying that they have found a safe haven in countries like Sweden and Finland. Another issue, interestingly, as Nina was pointing out there, that perhaps there is room for negotiations and some sort of a compromise. And the feeling is perhaps it's the second issue that President Erdogan highlighted yesterday, and that's the arms embargo sanctions that were imposed in Turkey back in 2019 by these Nordic countries following Turkey's military offensive in northeastern Syria. President Erdogan saying yesterday he can't vote yes when those countries that are sanctioning his country to be members of the alliance. So perhaps there is room for negotiations there. And despite the tough talk from President Erdogan, Eleni, we've heard from his senior officials over the weekend saying that this is not Turkey's position. It's not a firm no, it is not a definite veto, but they want their security issues addressed. And we've also heard the support they've gotten from the NATO Secretary General saying, look, if Turkey has issues, they should be addressed. The consensus is that Turkey will eventually vote yes, as it has in the past.
Jemana, I have to ask you quickly, Turkey has about 401,000 active personnel right now. Just how important is Turkey to the NATO alliance?
Well, it is NATO's second largest army. This is historically a strategic ally that, has proven itself over the past decades, especially during the Cold War. Turkey continues to provide protection for NATO's southern flank. But, Turkey has had quite a complicated relationship with NATO, especially, Eleni, in recent years, where Turkey has felt that NATO allies have not really taken its security concerns, threats to its national security seriously, especially when it comes to NATO allies like the United States and others providing support to the YPG, that Syrian Kurdish militia in northeastern Syria, that Turkey views as an extension of the PKK, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, existential threat to this country. So look, while some feel that this is not necessarily just about Sweden and Finland right now, these are long-term grievances that Turkey has had with its NATO allies that are coming to the fore right now.
Jemana Karache and Nina Dos Santos, thank you so much. Right, as Jemana just mentioned, Turkey is NATO's second largest military and extremely important to the strategic alliance. For more on this, I'd like to bring in Ömer Taspina, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution specializing in Turkey. Ömer, thank you so much for joining us. I think I have to ask you simply, do you think Turkey is capable of blocking a vote to get Sweden and Finland into NATO?
The short answer is yes. Turkey has leverage. NATO takes this decision, the decisions to take new partners unanimously. So if one country within NATO objects to membership of a new country, that country could block the whole process. Similar dynamics apply to the European Union. So Erdogan here has major leverage, not just with Finland and Sweden, but more importantly with the United States. And let's not forget, Erdogan is the ultimate transactional politician. So he's eyeing Washington and what he can get from President Biden more so than what he can get from just Sweden and Finland.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So let's talk about those potential transactions. What will he be asking for? We know the Kurdish Workers' Party, PKK, he's saying that Sweden has been assisting them or, harboring them. And then the other important point, which Turkey has been very vocal about, is the arms embargo, that it feels that it hasn't been able to purchase arms like other NATO members. How quickly do you think these issues can be and will be resolved?
Well, it depends on how much President Biden wants to compromise on Turkey. Right now, there are military sanctions against Turkey. In fact, Turkey is unable to buy the F-35s that it was part of the production process because it has purchased Russian missile defense system from Russia. So I'm sure what Erdogan wants is a presidential call from Biden or maybe an invitation to Washington where he can discuss with President Biden whether Turkey will receive F-35s, whether Turkey will receive military support from the United States, and whether this military embargo, the sanctions that Turkey is under from the United States can be lifted. That's the big item on Erdogan's agenda.
Okay, so Ömer, I have to ask you this. How do you think Turkey is weighing up the risks, the Russian risks and security in Europe versus his internal, issues and domestic issues? Versus the fact that Putin must be smiling right now, going, Erdogan is exactly the challenge that, NATO needs right now to not expand. And Turkey's sitting in a very interesting position right now where they're saying, well, we're negotiating with Russia, we're playing this diplomat in the region. And on the other end, instead of showing, a force with NATO, perhaps standing on the sidelines.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, Putin has invested a lot on Erdogan in his relationship with Erdogan because he considered Turkey and Erdogan the weakest link within NATO. So Turkey purchasing Russian missile defense systems was very, very favorable to Russia. And right now, it seems like Putin has outsourced the issue of blocking NATO expansion to Turkey. And Turkey is willing to play that game. Now, that's why it depends on how much President Biden is willing to also compromise on this. This is just the opening gambit, in my opinion, of what Erdogan wants to do. He is very clear about being a transactional politician. He's also eyeing Putin has a lot of leverage with Turkey. Turkey is dependent on Russian gas, Russian oil, Russian tourism, and Putin still has a military in Syria. If it bombs northern Syria, Turkey will have to open the border to another 1, 2, 3, 4 million Syrian refugees. So let's not forget that Putin is also part of this multidimensional chess, and he may force Erdogan not to compromise on this issue.
Yeah, very interesting, questioning the relationship between Erdogan and Putin, a conversation we must have again. Ömer, thank you very much for your insights. Right, next we are joined by Christiane Amanpour live from Afghanistan. The humanitarian situation under the Taliban is going from bad to worse. By some calculations, it could be deadlier than decades of war. As rights dwindle in Afghanistan, people there have one less option for seeking justice. The Taliban dissolved the country's independent Human Rights Commission along with several other agencies. And they cite budgetary reasons. Afghanistan's economy is so battered, nearly 20 million people are said to be facing acute hunger. There are fears the crisis could kill more Afghans than 2 decades of war. All this as the Taliban say they want to be considered a legitimate government. CNN chief international anchor Christiane Amanpour is reporting for us from Kabul. Christiane, it's one thing for us to read the data and the stats from where we are, comfort of our own homes. It's another to see it. Can you give me a sense of what you've experienced?
Yes, Eleni, and as you know, and as the world knows, Afghanistan has really fallen off the map because of the attention paid to Russia's war on Ukraine. And by the way, the wheat shortages, the grain shortages there are further impacting the desperate and grinding poverty here and other places around the world. All that to say that the statistics are truly horrendous, and the UN, various different organizations basically are saying that, you know, potentially up to 9 million people could face famine-like conditions. There are some 20 million people, that's almost half the population, facing and in the midst of acute hunger. The IRC, the International Rescue Committee, says that nearly half the population here survives on less than 1 meal a day. These sound like statistics, but we have seen it, and we have talked to people who are undergoing these terrible conditions. And as you said, the extraordinary fact is that according to the humanitarian organizations, the number of people who could die because of this terrible humanitarian catastrophe could dwarf the number of civilians who've died during 20 years of war. Those were the very, very worst predictions. Now, they have managed to get through the winter, but aid agencies are concerned that it will just crop up again, this terrible shortage, particularly because a drought that is already building might get worse. And as I said, grain and other food prices have skyrocketed across the world. This country is not immune. And we saw people who, I mean, honestly, in Kabul, we were told that some of these people had never in their lives and never in history stood in line for humanitarian assistance. Some of the people we saw, we were told and we asked, had jobs before. They were educated, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. There were women, there were men, they were old, they were young. There is no discrimination in terms of the poverty as it is striking the people here right now. So we've been to hospitals, to aid distribution centers, into one family's home. As I said, some eat just one meal a day, and even that is a hard scrabble. Some have to put their children out to work to try to get some income. When I say children, I mean 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds. It's truly a terrible situation on this humanitarian level, Eleni.
Yeah, it's completely shocking to hear, Christiane. I mean, look, the World Food Programme from the start of this crisis was pleading for more funds to assist. Give me a sense of just how, present the humanitarian agencies are on the ground and whether they have enough resources to be able to assist. You've rightly said there's been a huge supply constraint on grain and wheat, which of course is compounding the issue.
Well, exactly. Now, the humanitarian agencies, they're working, really hard. There are sanctions on this country, as you know, but the United States and other countries, but mostly the United States, has done these, what they call carve-outs, quite a few carve-outs to make sure that all the aid the humanitarian agencies need does go to the people. They will not funnel any money through the Taliban government. It's all going around the Taliban and to the people. They've also, they tell me, a Western official, that they have had carve-outs for businesses, including some businesses that are conducted through the government. So they're trying to do their best to assuage the humanitarian crisis. But humanitarian assistance is not a replacement or you can't have an economy just based on humanitarian assistance. So the economy, the activity here has collapsed over the last 9 months since the Taliban's been in power and since the West left this country to its own devices. I mean, it's truly a real moral dilemma because now, according to Western officials who I speak to, they've got to decide whether they're going to engage with the Taliban and to try to save lives or whether they're going to continue to hold this government accountable for just about everything, including, of course, women's rights. And we do delve into that more this evening on our show, and we will continue to do so this week because it is part of the terrible crisis that has emerged here because the West doesn't want to engage in part with a government that does not uphold the rights of the women as they have won them over the last 20 years, and that does not abide by international humanitarian and human rights protocols. So this is a very, very difficult dilemma, and the cost of it and the price of it is being paid by the people here. It's truly tragic. I haven't seen it this bad since I first covered Afghanistan in the 90s, and humanitarian organizations say it's much worse today.
Christiane, thank you so much for bringing to light these issues. And I know you sat down with an exclusive interview with the deputy Taliban leader, and we'll be watching that full interview during your show, Amanpour, later tonight, 9 p.m. here in Abu Dhabi, and that's 9:30 in Kabul. And of course, you can also find out more on CNN.com. That was Christiane Amanpour reporting live from Kabul. It has been a solemn week here in the UAE. World leaders are making condolence calls for the late president, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and they've been meeting with his successor, Sheikh Mohammed. The visitors could give us an idea of the UAE's direction and the relationships it's forging in the region moving forward. On Monday, we saw US Vice President Kamala Harris lead a major delegation to Abu Dhabi, trying to smooth out some recent bumps in the relationship, especially over Washington's refusal so far to relist Yemen's Houthi movement as a terrorist organization. That same day, Sheikh Mohammed welcoming Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, as well as the Foreign Minister of Iran. He is the highest-ranking Iranian official to visit the UAE in months, as the two countries signal their desire to de-escalate tensions that have marred their relationship. Up next, after several cancelled appearances, Queen Elizabeth is on the move. So to what do we owe this surprise? That's coming up next. Jake Daniels of the Blackpool Football Club is being celebrated around the world. The 17-year-old came out as gay on Monday in a statement released by the club, the first male footballer to do so in the UK in over 30 years. Daniels' decision has received widespread support from across football and beyond. England captain Harry Kane posted on Twitter, "Massive credit to you and the way your friends, family, club and captain have supported you. Football should be welcoming for everyone." And the great Sir Ian McKellen has reacted, saying, "At 17, Jake Daniels represents a generation that rejects old-fashioned homophobia in football and elsewhere, those who haven't yet grown up as he has. He sets an example. No wonder so many of us, gay and everyone else, admire and treasure him as a hero. What a goal he's scored." And for tonight's parting shots, a surprise appearance at London's Paddington Station by Queen Elizabeth, dressed in bright yellow with a walking stick in hand. The occasion, the opening of the new Elizabeth line named in her honour. Prince Edward, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and London Mayor Sadiq Khan accompanied the Queen for the opening. While she did not use the train, she was given an Oyster card, because you never know when you'll need a prepaid travel card. After several cancelled appearances in recent months due to mobility issues, the Queen's visit was a welcome surprise. Interesting yellow outfit, and I also noticed the blue flower on her hat. All right, thanks so much for joining us. One World with Zain Asher is up next. I'm Eleni Jakos. Take care.
Hello everyone, I'm Zain Asher in New York and this is One World. As the Russian invasion of Ukraine nears the 3-month mark, the Kremlin is celebrating a significant milestone and there are signs the war may be entering a critical new phase. After months of incessant bombardment, the battle for Mariupol is effectively over. Ukraine says it's working to evacuate the remaining troops from their last stronghold, the Azovstal steel plant. It was the site of some of the fiercest fighting in a conflict already defined by its brutality. It's a symbolic and psychological victory for Russia, but it's actually a logistical win as well, one that would allow the Kremlin to secure a land corridor between Crimea and the Donbass. It could also free up troops for Russia's struggling eastern offensive. Ukraine says Russian forces are shelling border areas on the northern front, in some cases striking villages that have already been evacuated with no obvious strategic value. In the Chernihiv region, not far from Belarus, local officials say a missile strike led to heavy casualties. Attacks on certain border areas are increasing as Ukrainian counteroffensive in the northeast gathers momentum. Kyiv says government troops are advancing on a town that has become a Russian resupply route. CNN's Melissa Bell joins us live now from Kyiv. So Melissa, the Kremlin no doubt celebrating this capture of Mariupol. But let's talk about the hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers that are being evacuated right now. Many of them, of course, injured. What happens to them now? They are technically prisoners of war.
That's right. And I think it's an important reminder when you look at those images that have been released by the Russian Ministry of Defense to remember that. It's why we're blurring their faces. They are prisoners of war. We had seen those evacuations begin yesterday, Zain, and clearly for all the many hundreds of families that have been calling for the release of their loved ones whose dwindling medical and food supplies had been a source of concern for them. They feared that they might simply starve to death, even beyond the regular bombings that they were coming under Russian fire over the course of the last couple of weeks, especially since the civilians were evacuated at the beginning of the month. So their plight had become such a source of inspiration, really, for the Ukrainian resistance that I think you're quite right to point out that this is an important win for Russia, not only strategically, but psychologically and in terms of its momentum as well. For the families, clearly, it is also a source of hope. We spoke to some of them, one mother and daughter who've taken shelter on the outskirts of Kyiv since they fled that shelling and eventual razing of Mariupol back in March to come and seek shelter here. They hadn't seen their husband and father since the 8th of March. We caught up with them a short while ago, and I think it's important to remember, Zain, that even while we watch those evacuations, even as we take in what the fall of Mariupol means for the wider war, even as we take in what the evacuation of those Azovstal fighters means for it, there is uncertainty for the families. We don't know how many of them have been evacuated. They don't know if their family member is amongst those evacuated. And of course, the negotiations continue. Have a listen to what Tatiana had to tell us a short while ago.
We so hope that he will return, that this will happen. We've been waiting for it for so long. We love him very much and are waiting for him.
I really want my dad to come back. Our family has been through so much since 2014. Poor dad, really.
The family were twice refugees, first from the 2014 war. That's what had brought them to Mariupol. And this latest war has brought them to the outskirts of Kyiv. Now they await anxiously to find out whether their husband and father is amongst those evacuated, whether or not he is amongst the wounded. And of course, more broadly, all of these families are waiting to find out now that their loved ones are prisoners of war of Russia, whether or not they will be handed back in what Ukraine is hoping will be an exchange of prisoners, Zain.
Melissa, just in terms of the broader conflict overall, we're learning that negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv have been suspended at this point. Just walk us through what more you know.
That's right. We've been hearing that from an advisor close to President Zelensky. The overall picture is looking fairly grim as well. He's announced that the negotiations have been suspended, blaming the Russian mindset and saying that, and suggesting really in what he had to say that the idea that perhaps Russia, as a result of what you just described in the fall of Mariupol, might seek to claim some sort of partition of Ukraine as a solution is clearly unacceptable to the Ukrainian side. We don't know much more about those negotiations, simply that they've been suspended, and that cannot be a good sign for a country, as you say, which continues to see shelling on its northern borders, but also, you mentioned a moment ago, further south in the Chernihiv region, just an hour and a half here from Kyiv, where that Desna military complex was shelled overnight, several dead, several wounded. We don't have an exact figure, but the fighting continues in a war where the momentum, at least in terms of the symbolism of Azovstal, has for the first time, I'd say in a few weeks, come back towards the Russian side, Zain.
All right, Melissa Bell, live for us there. Thank you so much. The seismic shift in European security because of the war just got closer. In the last few hours, Finland's parliament overwhelmingly voted in favour of applying for NATO membership. Neighbouring Sweden has already declared its intention to also join the alliance as well. Finland's president and the Swedish Prime Minister held a joint news conference earlier announcing both countries will submit their applications on Wednesday. Both Sweden and Finland say they believe differences with Turkey will be resolved. Turkey's president is threatening to veto their membership. He accuses the Nordic countries of harbouring what he describes as Kurdish terror groups. Nina Dos Santos is following all the developments from Stockholm. She joins us live now. So here's the thing, Nina. To be a member of NATO, that requires consensus approval from all existing members. So with Turkey so staunchly opposed to the membership of Finland and Sweden, what happens next?
Well, first of all, what's not entirely clear is whether or not it's the Turkish president who's voicing his personal views, or whether Turkey as a whole, as a country, diplomatically would press those diplomatic levers and actually be prepared to veto Sweden and Finland's accession to the alliance. Remember, that would come with all sorts of diplomatic consequences for other NATO members that have thrown their weight otherwise almost unanimously in favour of Sweden and Finland joining. And that weight also now includes the US President Joe Biden, who we learned a couple of hours ago has invited the leaders of both Sweden and Finland to Washington, D.C. on Thursday to talk about exactly this, the enlargement of NATO with these two crucial members potentially joining, and how to get over any of these roadblocks that are presented along the way, including, for instance, opposition from the Turkish president. These are issues I had a chance to discuss with Magdalena Andersson, the Prime Minister of Sweden, starting out with how much this was a significant move for her party personally after 73 years of resistance to NATO membership for Sweden, and then what it means thereafter for its relations with Turkey and also Russia.
Of course, this is a very special day for all of us in Sweden. I mean, we have been without being part of any military alliance for 200 years. And now we decide to change this because we think this is better for the future to be a member in NATO, for the security of Sweden and the Swedish people. And of course, we hope for a quick process, and we will also work very actively with all NATO member countries to make sure that we can have a good discussion.
You hope for a quick process, but of course Turkey has voiced some objections repeatedly now a couple of times over the last week. How confident are you that you're going to be able to overcome those objections from President Erdogan? And what exactly is he negotiating for here?
Of course, we are looking forward to having a close dialogue with Turkey on different levels, and also we are ready to go to Turkey to discuss the issues that Turkey might have with Sweden as a member of NATO. So we're also looking forward to be able to have a closer bilateral relation with Turkey when we become members of NATO.
Are you confident that you'll be able to achieve that? You have asked for phone calls with President Erdogan. Has he returned your calls? Are you getting traction on this issue at the moment?
We have stated very clearly to Turkey that we are ready to talk, we are ready to go to Turkey to have bilateral discussions on the way forward. So we are ready to do our part.
You're headed to meet the US President Joe Biden soon. How much of a role is the United States going to be playing in helping to expedite the process for Sweden and Finland to join NATO?
Of course, we have to do our homework in Sweden and in Finland to have bilateral discussions with all NATO member countries. But of course, having a discussion with the United States and their president, both for the process in the United States, but of course also the discussions that NATO member countries have between themselves. That is very important.
Well, as you could hear there appears to be perhaps some room for negotiation with Turkey there. The Prime Minister of Sweden, just 4 months away from election, not just doing a U-turn on the whole subject of NATO membership that her party, as I pointed out, was dead against until about the 8th of May, just a couple of months ago, Zain, but also the issue of having a closer bilateral relationship with Turkey is political coded language for a bit of a rapprochement, and also that is something that here in domestic politics in Sweden will be viewed very, very keenly. A lot of people will be looking at that and seeing, are we seeing a softening of the stance here between Sweden and Turkey that have clashed on various issues, including an arms embargo that Sweden pushed for in 2019 when Turkey had a military incursion into northeastern Syria. And remember that there are many members of the Kurdish community that have come here from places where they say they've been persecuted by Turkey, and Turkey says that some of those groups are affiliated to terrorism. So there's a lot still to talk about, and these are difficult subjects, grievances that Turkey's brought to the fore from way before Sweden had its U-turn on NATO. Zain?
Nina Dos Santos live for us there. Thank you so much. All right, US President Joe Biden is in Buffalo, New York this hour to grieve with the community and pay tribute to the victims of Saturday's mass shooting. He and the First Lady have been meeting with first responders, community leaders and victims' families. In a speech expected shortly, Mr. Biden is going to be condemning the shooting as terrorism motivated by a hateful and perverse ideology. Joe Johns is with us now from Buffalo. So, Joe, here's the thing. During the election, President Biden described this issue as a battle for the soul of America. You'll remember that. As much as he denounces white supremacy, as much as he denounces hate speech and racism, are there any real kind of concrete actions the president can actually take here?
They haven't done a lot, and I think there are a variety of reasons why. First, you have to admit this is a midterm election year. It's a 50-50 Senate. This is a very political issue. The gun lobby is extremely strong. So those are reasons that the White House would likely point to as why they haven't been able to get their agenda through. Fact of the matter is they weren't able to get it through last year either, but the president continues to try. So what the White House is saying is that the president will continue to try to push executive action on his own to get some of the things in his anti-gun crime agenda through. And the other half of it, though, is the issue of racist language. And the White House has been peppered with questions over the last 48 hours about whether the president ought to use the bully pulpit in order to denounce or call out individuals who use certain language or promote certain ideologies like replacement theory, which the shooter in this case said he had subscribed to, and whether the president ought to specifically call out individuals in the media and in other places who push ideas like replacement theory. The White House has a couple answers for that. First and foremost, they say, look, the White House doesn't want to give anybody more of a platform than they already have by calling them out individually and by name. And the second thing they're saying is that even if the White House were to do that down the road, even if the president were to, this is not the time. That this behind me here, where the president is meeting with those families and first responders and others, this is a day for grieving with the city of Buffalo and consoling the victims and their survivors, Zain.
Joe, racist attacks in America, unfortunately, are nothing new. President Obama was in a similar situation back in 2015, having to console the victims of the Charleston massacre. I want to play our audience a scene from the funeral when Obama actually sang. Let's listen to that.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
I'll never forget that moment. 7 years ago, I was at work watching this on television at one of the screens, on the screens in the newsroom, and everything around me just froze. Everything around me froze as I listened to the US president, a black US president, singing Amazing Grace at the funeral for those victims. What has changed in this country, Joe, since then?
Not a lot. And you know what? That was an extremely powerful moment, and people have said that was one of the most powerful moments in Barack Obama's presidency. But he also admitted that this problem of crimes involving guns in the United States, this intractable problem, is one of the things that frustrated him most, that he was really not able to make any headway into. And again, the problem is what I mentioned at the top. It's politics, and it's the gun lobby, which is extremely powerful in Washington. And members of Congress, certainly in a midterm election year, are just well aware that getting behind some gun control that red state America really doesn't like could be politically damaging.
We are actually waiting for the US president to speak in Buffalo, New York. It looks as though Joe, do I have you back? Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we lost you. Yeah, we lost you temporarily. Politics aside, you were talking about the restrictive gun laws, and obviously President Joe Biden is going to be talking about tougher gun laws for sure. But politics aside, his job really in Buffalo today is to console and to comfort the family members of these victims. That is his job today. How does he do that?
If you think about it, just how hard would that be for any of us? I can tell you that traveling around this city over the last couple days and seeing and talking to and observing family members of these victims, they're disconsolate, and the city is in a state of deep despair. It's all a president can do, and it's a job of a president in almost every type of situation like this imaginable, to come and try to say something that would make people feel better. That doesn't necessarily happen, but if the president does not reach out and say something, then that's something you have to observe and ask why. This president is at least trying to be the consoler in chief, and that's about all you can expect from him. We'll hear what he has to say in just a little while.
Right. We're looking at the podium. We were looking at the podium, rather. President Joe Biden set to speak any moment now, of course, after 10 people brutally murdered in that mass shooting at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. All right, and we'll continue to follow developments from Buffalo and bring you the president's comments as we remember the victims as well. Don't go away. Somalia's new president may be familiar to you. That's because he was the president there from 2012 to 2017. On Sunday, after a presidential election was delayed for a year, Somalia's parliament returned Hassan Sheikh Mohamud to power. He's taking over a nation facing the country's worst drought in decades. Somalia is buckling under debilitating inflation, but its biggest problem of all, the ever-present threat posed by the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. In December 2020, an accused Al-Shabaab operative was charged with plotting a 9/11-style attack on the US. Back in March, a suicide bomber hit a rural polling station, killing a prominent female lawmaker and dozens of others. And 2 weeks ago, the group claimed it killed dozens of soldiers after it attacked a major military base near the capital. All right, it looks as though President Biden is speaking now in Buffalo, New York. Let's listen in.
To say thank you to the families for opening up your hearts to us and for letting us be with you today. So God bless you, and thank you for allowing us to be with you. Yeah.
Majority Leader Schumer and Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Higgins. And Gov, thank you for taking my call when I called. And I'll never forget what she said. I said, I'd like to maybe come up if it's okay. She said, this is a big Scranton. Come. And I think you're doing a heck of a job. Thank you. Thank you for your heart as well as your head. And Mayor Brown, you've been wonderful. Thank you. And I know this is a lot of, when a vice presidential or a presidential trip shows up, it's there's all kinds of paraphernalia and people, and I know it's not easy. I want to thank your law enforcement officers for not just what they did in this crisis, but for accommodating us, and all the elected officials and law enforcement officers, first responders, and faith leaders that are here today. Jill and I have come to stand with you, and to the families, we've come to grieve with you. It's not the same, but we know a little bit what it's like to lose a piece of your soul. When you lose a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, a mother, a father. The feeling of having that, as I said to some of you when we talked privately, you feel like there's a black hole in your chest you're being sucked into, and you're suffocating, unable to breathe. That's what it felt like, at least to us, and I'm sure some version of that feels that way to you. The anger, the pain, the depth of a loss that's so profound. You know, we know it's hard to believe, and you're probably not going to believe it, but I can tell you now, from our personal experience and many others who we've met, the day's going to come, it will come, when your loved one brings a smile as you remember him or her. As you remember her, it's going to bring a smile to your lip before it brings a tear to your eye. It takes a while for that to happen. It takes a while. Might take more than a season. But our prayer for you is that that time comes sooner or later, but I promise you it will come. As a nation, I say to the families, we remember them. We've been reading about them. We visited the memorial where they show the love for them, and you've all shown by the supermarket. And Celestine Cheney, 65 years old, brain cancer survivor, churchgoer, bingo player, went to buy strawberries to make her favorite shortcake. A loving mother and a grandmother. Roberta Drury, 32, beloved daughter and sister, moved back home to help take care of her brother after his bone marrow transplant. She went to buy groceries for dinner. The center of attention, who made everyone in the room laugh and smile when she walked in. Andre McNeil, 53, worked at a restaurant, went to buy his 3-year-old son a birthday cake. His son's selling a birthday, asking where's daddy. Catherine Massey, 72, a writer and an advocate, who dressed up in costumes at schools and cut the grass in the park and helped in local elections, the glue of the family and the community. Marcus Morrison, 52, school bus aide, went to buy snacks for a weekly movie night with the family, survived by his wife and 3 children and a stepdaughter, the center of their world. Hayward Patterson, 67, father, church deacon, fed the homeless at the soup kitchen, gave rides at the grocery store to neighbors who needed help, putting food in the trunk of others when he took his final breath. Aaron Solder, 55, retired Buffalo police officer for 3 decades. 3 decades. Loved electric cars, hero who gave his life to save others on a Saturday afternoon. And had that man not been wearing that vest that he purchased, bulletproof vest, a lot of lives would have been saved. A beloved father and husband. Geraldine Talley, 62, expert banker and known for her warm, gentle personality, a friend to everybody, devoted mother and grandmother. Ruth Whitfield, 88, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, sang in the church choir, a caretaker of her husband, bringing him clean clothes, cutting his hair, holding his hand every day she visited him in the nursing home. Heart as big as her head. Pearl Young, 77, a mother, grandmother, missionary of God, public school teacher, who also ran the local food pantry. Loved singing, dancing, and her family. And all 3 are injured. Zaire Goodman, 20, shot in the neck, but fighting through it. Jennifer Warrington, 50, Christopher Braden, 55, both treated with injuries on a long road to recovery. Individual lives of love, service, and community that speaks to the bigger story of who we are as Americans. A great nation, because we're good people. Jill and I bring you this message from deep in our nation's soul. In America, evil will not win, I promise you. Hate will not prevail, and white supremacy will not have the last word. For the evil did come to Buffalo. It's come to all too many places. Manifesting gunmen who massacred innocent people in the name of hateful and perverse ideology, rooted in fear and racism. It's taken so much. 10 lives cut short in a grocery store. 3 other wounded by a hate-filled individual who had driven 200 miles from Binghamton in that range to carry out a murderous, racist rampage that he would live stream to the world. What happened here is simple and straightforward. Terrorism. Terrorism. Domestic terrorism. Violence inflicted in the service of hate and the vicious thirst for power that defines one group of people being inherently inferior to any other group. A hate that through the media and politics, the internet, has radicalized, angry, alienated, lost, and isolated individuals into falsely believing that they will be replaced, that's the word, replaced, by the other, by people who don't look like them, and who are, therefore, in a perverse ideology that they possess and being fed lesser beings. I and all of you reject the lie. I call on all Americans to reject the lie. And I condemn those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and for profit. That's what it is. We've now seen too many times the deadly and destructive violence this ideology unleashes. We heard the chants, "You will not replace us," in Charlottesville, Virginia. I wasn't going to run, as the senator knows, again for president. When I saw those people coming out of the woods or the fields in Virginia, in Charlottesville, carrying torches, shouting, "You will not replace us," accompanied by white supremacists and carrying Nazi banners. That's when I said, no, no. And I, honest to God, those who know me, Chuck, you know, I wasn't going to run for certain. But I was going to be darned if I was going to let anyway. I'm going to get going. Look, we've seen the mass shootings in Charleston, South Carolina, El Paso, Texas, and Pittsburgh, last year in Atlanta, this week in Dallas, Texas, and now in Buffalo, New York. White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison running through it really is. Running through our body politic. And it's been allowed to fester and grow right in front of our eyes. No more. I mean, no more. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America. None. And look, failure for us to not say that, failure in saying that is going to be complicity. Silence is complicity. It's complicity. We cannot remain silent. Our nation's strength has always come from the idea. It's going to sound corny, but think about it. What's the idea of our nation? That we're all children of God. All life, liberty, our universal goods, gifts of God. We didn't get it from a government. We got it from because we exist. We're called upon to defend them. The venom of the haters and their weapons of war, the violence and the words and deeds that stalk our streets, our stores, our schools. This venom, this violence cannot be the story of our time. We cannot allow that to happen. Look, I'm not naive. I know tragedy will come again. It cannot be forever overcome. It cannot be fully understood either. But there are certain things we can do. We can keep assault weapons off our streets. We've done it before. I did it when we passed the crime bill last time. And violence went down. Shootings went down. You can't prevent people from being radicalized to violence. But we can address the relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism. We just need to have the courage to do that, to stand up. Look, the American experiment in democracy is in a danger like it hasn't been in my lifetime. It's in danger this hour. Hate and fear are being given too much oxygen by those who pretend to love America, but who don't understand America. To confront the ideology of hate requires caring about all people, not making distinctions. Reverend, the scripture is seeing that we're all part of the divine. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the America I know, that Jill knows. And most deserve the most, look, we're the most multiracial, most dynamic nation in the history of the world. Now's the time for the people of all races, from every background, to speak up as a majority in America and reject white supremacy. These actions we've seen in these hate-filled attacks represent the views of a hate-filled minority. We can't allow them to distort America, the real America. We can't allow them to destroy the soul of the nation. As President of the United States, I travel the world all the time. And other nations ask me, heads of state in other countries, ask me, what's going on? What in God's name happened on January 6th? What happened in Buffalo? What happened? They'll ask. We have to refuse to live in a country where black people going about a weekly grocery shopping can be gunned down by weapons of war deployed in a racist cause. We have to refuse to live in a country where fear and lies are packaged for power and for profit. We must all enlist in this great cause of America. This is work that requires all of us, presidents, politicians, commentators, citizens. None of us can stay in the sidelines. We have to resolve that here in Buffalo, that from the tragedy, this tragedy will come hope and light and life. It has to. And that on our watch, the sacred cause of America will never bow, never break, never bend. And the American we love, the one we love, will endure. So to the families, from your pain, may we find purpose to live life worthy of the loved ones you lost. From a hymn based on the 91st Psalm that's sung in my church, may he raise you up on eagle's wings and bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. That's my wish for us. We can do this if we resolve to do it. If we take on the haters and those who don't even care, it's just about profit and politics. May the soul of the fallen rest in peace and rise in glory. And may God guide the United States of America, now and always. To the families, as my grandpop used to say when I walked out of his home in Scranton, he'd say, "Joey, spread the faith." And my grandma would yell, "No, Joey." He'd say, "Keep the faith." And my grandma would say, "No, Joey, spread the faith." We're thinking of you. Hold on to each other tightly. Stick together. You'll get through this. And we'll make Buffalo and the United States a better place to live than it is today.
A heartfelt, impassioned speech from US President Joe Biden there, speaking after 10 people went to the supermarket, went to Tops Market in Buffalo, New York on an ordinary Saturday afternoon to buy groceries and never came home. He offered love and condolences to the family members of the victims who now find themselves planning funerals. Obviously there is so much agony and so much pain there in Buffalo, New York. The president talked about the fact that white supremacy in this country is a poison. There is simply no place for it. He said that evil in this country cannot win. He talked about the fact that guns obviously is a political issue in the United States right now. He didn't expand too much on restricting guns in America, but he touched on it, the fact that there does need to be, he believes, much more gun control in this country. We heard the US president talk about the fact that this is a personal issue for him because he knows what it's like to lose a loved one. He knows what it's like to lose a family member. President Joe Biden has, of course, lost his own son, Beau Biden, to brain cancer. He also lost a daughter and his former wife as well in a car accident. He spoke about that initially when he started addressing the public there. But once again, President Joe Biden speaking there in front of a crowd, talking to Americans, saying that he is with them, but he does know that this is likely to happen in America again. This is an issue that keeps on coming up. He talked about the fact that constantly he's having to talk to other leaders who say to him, what is going on? What is going on in this country? That there continues to be this level of gun violence. Again, saying that evil has no place in America and that white supremacy is indeed a poison. All right, thank you so much for watching One World. I'm Zain Asher. African Voices is up next. You are, of course, watching CNN.
Welcome to African Voices. I'm Maritoko, and this week I have a flavorful show featuring some change-making chefs. In Ghana, there's a woman combining traditions from her culture with some new age thinking to create unique culinary experiences.
My cuisine is bold. It's authentic. It's plain flavors. It's highly influenced by the lifestyle of my people.
I use food to tell stories, inspire, and empower women in Fulani communities across West Africa. It tastes so good. I'm Chef Binta. I'm a change maker.
For Chef Fatmata Binta, cooking is food for the soul.
I started cooking well at the age of 8. I've always been around food, the kitchen. It was everything to me. Watching my mother, my aunties, taking food, creating something interesting, bringing people together.
While Binta pursued a variety of careers, she always found a way back to cooking.
I studied international relations. I studied marketing. I worked as a TV presenter. But one thing was missing for me, and I've always loved food. I was supposed to go to Sierra Leone, but then there was Ebola, so I couldn't go. So I came to Ghana instead, and I got bored at some point. And then I went to Nairobi and studied culinary arts.
She moved to Ghana for work, but soon became tired of traditional culinary jobs, saying she wanted to spice up her life and reconnect with her heritage.
And I wanted to explore more, to understand my food, my culture, and just represent African cuisine. So I left my job, I quit, and then I started promoting Fulani cuisine with a concept called Dine on a Mat. It was important for me as a Fulani girl. I grew up in the food culture, the community. The fondest memories I still hold today was me going on vacations to the Fulani communities.
The Fulani are one of the largest nomadic tribes in the world. Chef Binta opened the Fulani kitchen and began hosting Dine on a Mat experiences to educate communities across Africa about the Fulani culture and cuisine.
Most times, there's a misconception when you think about Fulani cuisine because we are cattle people. They think it's all meat. Our food is actually highly plant-based because most of our ingredients we sun-dry and we try to take guests on a journey. I'm trying to preserve my food culture. It's a very traditional, nomadic experience. So most times we have guests sit on the mat. They eat with their hands. We tell stories. You know, sitting on the mat, it grounds you. It makes you level, you know, and it brings compassion. It's a lot of things. And I think that's powerful. I want anyone that sits on my mat should live as an ambassador for the Fulani people.
This is where all the trading happens within the Fulani community in Nima.
To prepare for the evening, the chef makes a trip to the local market.
Okay, so let me have this. Medase. These are some of the things I usually buy here. We buy locally, and then we take it to the test kitchen, and then we grind it and mix. That's why it's very important to have conversations when you visit the market or these people, because they have knowledge more than the chef in the modern kitchen. We learn from them. They will always remain the teachers of our authentic recipes.
Back in her kitchen, Chef Binta adds a modern twist to a traditional meal.
So I'm now smoking the wagashi I bought from the Fulani community. Most times they prepare food the traditional way. They use traditional techniques for centuries. But as a chef, I'm taking inspiration from them. But it's very important for me to use modern techniques for it to be appealing to the guests. This is meditation for me. I've added the plantains, and now I'm going to add the tomato confit, and then the cheese. I'll add the plantain chips, and then the suya powder, and then that's it. When a dish goes out, I have to follow them and go and introduce the dish and the concept.
For me, the most fulfilling part is when a guest walks out saying that they enjoyed the food or the stories triggered something for them. For me, it's very much fulfilling, and it also challenges me to go back, and dig deep into my food culture and get more creative. With my Dine on a Mat experience, I want to touch every city, one city at a time, one plate at a time, and connect people to food. But most importantly, preserve our African food culture by telling stories.
Chef Binta's vibrant dishes and cultural experiences have launched her onto the world stage. In 2021, she won the Best Chef's Rising Star Award.
It was an amazing experience.
This is for all the chefs from Africa.
I wasn't expecting it, to be honest.
Thank you all for having me.
I was just sitting there with my brother, and then they called my name. It was emotional. It was an emotional moment, but it was beautiful. I encourage people to get to know their food more. It means embracing your food traditions. Let's slow down. Let's slow down and enjoy food.
Next, see how Chef Binta is empowering Fulani women.
We want to tell the stories that Fulanis are more than headsmen.
Chef Fatimata Binta is connecting with the Fulani people, one of the largest nomadic tribes in the world, through food.
Our culture is beautiful, our food is amazing. For me, I feel responsible to share that to the world and tell the story, different stories about the people.
She opened the Fulani kitchen and began hosting Dine on a Mat experiences to share the tribe's unique cuisine with communities across Ghana and beyond.
It's just special always when you source directly from here. Imagine the quality right now. Texture is intact, flavors, and you take it straight to the Dine on the Mat experience. It's just a different level. Well, I used to do this as a kid.
Today, she's learning new recipes and sourcing ingredients from a Fulani community outside of Accra.
This is moringa leaves, and this is a stew that is authentic in this Fulani community. And she's teaching me. I don't know this stew, so this is very much new to me also. So usually what I do, I come into these communities, I spend time with the locals, the keepers of the authentic recipes, like the grandmother, spend time, watch her cook, and then I take this inspiration back to my kitchen in Accra, and then I do an interpretation of it. It smells so good. For them, cooking is like it's like meditation in a way. You know, it's their entertainment because they don't have too many things they do in these communities apart from the chores in the home. So everything is done with so much love and care. They take their time. So this is wagashi cheese, which is the local cheese made in Africa. And you only find the Fulani women doing this. So this I'm taking to the test kitchen and I'm going to do something. It's one of our crowd's favorite. If you taste this cheese, the flavor, the quality, so different. Small, see? Teacher, I'm learning.
After being welcomed into multiple Fulani communities, Shabinta says she was inspired to create the Fulani Kitchen Foundation. It aims to preserve their culture and help Fulani women across West Africa grow crops, develop skills, and sell their products.
So what they are trying to do is create patterns on the calabashes. It's designing. For them, this is art, and then they will sell in the market. So this is part of the programs and the initiatives we are working on. So start having these women involved in this arts and crafts to pass time, apart from just the daily chores in the home. And then we can sell it, and also that money goes back into the community. This is the calabash seeds, which we'll plant because it's a sustainable bowl. It's all about sustainability for the Fulani people.
She's also helping communities get better access to natural resources.
One thing we noticed while traveling across Africa, most of these communities they struggle for clean water, and this is a necessity. So we collaborated with Ghana Food Movement, and then we built this water well. This is something we want to continue and build water wells across all these communities. It's very important, you know, for me to be involved in that, not just come in, take inspiration and go, but also give back in a way. You come here, they took their time, they are so open, they welcome me. And I go back, other people experience their handwork, because this is not me doing it, this is them. So it's them going on a journey with me, even though they are not physically there, but their fingerprint is on everything I do. And for me, that fulfills me.
While she's made strides to help the Fulani people, Shabinta says she's already cooking up an idea to expand her reach.
Our main goal is to build the center very soon this year. So we're going to create a space where we'll have the farm, we'll have the test kitchen. People come in, learn, do programs, internship programs with students from around the world. And also create, you know, collaborate with other chefs and highlight African cuisine and make it more interesting. I feel like we've been stuck in the old ways, and now there is Afrofusion conversations going on. You know, there's so much about African food that hasn't been tapped into. I feel like it's very exciting, and African food is the future, and the future is now.